And make sure you ask him about his shark finning program. It's really unique. Seriously. Next is Micheal Austin. He's from BYD, Vice President of BYD. You may not know who BYD is. They're an awesome company. He's a great guy. Thanks.
So I'm the Vice President of Marketing and PR for BYD. I've been with BYD 6 years. I've known BYD for about 12 years. I was with Motorola for 15. And in the procurement role, I bought about 70% of the razors for Motorola from BYD. So they manufactured a lot of cell phones. In 2003, 2002, they started manufacturing automobiles in the China domestic market. So I'm going to really focus my discussion on China and how BYD's looked at how that market is evolving very, very quickly, because I think it has ramifications for our discussions here. If not, will force some of our decisions one way or the other. So update on China. So our growth, we would be very pleased if we hit 13 or 14 million vehicle sales in the United States this year. China did 18 million last year, and they're controlling some of the growth, or they're trying to. It went from, I think, 27% last year to 37%. This year, it may be at 10% to 15%. But that means by 2015, which is kind of a milestone that we've heard from the Obama administration. By 2015, there will be about 25 million cars sold in China. And their goal is to have 10% new energy vehicles. And they want to roll that out to 50%, their goal, by 2020. That means by 2020, if there are 47 million cars sold in China, 23 million of those will be new energy vehicles if the government meets their goals. So I'll talk about some of the policies and trends that they're driving and some of the technologies. So BYD introduced a parallel series hybrid electric vehicle in mass production in December of 2008, the F3DM. That's also been in fleet testing in LA as well. We introduced an all-electric E6 for fleet testing in spring of 2010. That E6 in the center is a 5-passenger crossover vehicle. It's driven a cumulative 2.7 million miles in taxi fleet operation, and they've beat those taxis up for now 18 months. It's been a very good test. What we've been able to prove to the market is that we can rapid charge those cars in 20 minutes without a significant degradation of range or energy. And that is with the iron phosphate chemistry. We also launched buses, electric buses. We have about 300 electric buses running on city streets, and the cumulative miles is now over about 60,000 miles. We have one bus going around the U.S. right now. It's been in 13 cities. But that bus is an all-electric bus that goes 300 kilometers on a single charge and can carry 65 passengers standing room, and if you're in China. In the U.S., you need a little more personal space, about 40 passengers by U.S. standards. But still, that goes 187 miles on about $8 of energy cost versus 25 gallons of diesel or the equivalent on CNG. So it's a very, very interesting mass transit solution because of the operating expense. So these are some of the products that are rolling out in China. This is the summary on the taxi fleet. You'll see these red taxis across Shenzhen. There's also a blue version, and now they're up to about 300 of those taxis running on city streets. Hertz has began renting those vehicles also in Shenzhen. They have some on order for Shanghai and for Beijing that'll be launching very, very quickly. So it's a very interesting. Now those rentals are for chauffeur rentals. So chauffeurs will go in and rent the car and then do chauffeuring service in China. So it's still very much a public transportation. The interesting thing about both the cars and the buses, and when you're talking about the future, I believe that the issue will become a design for adaptability. I totally agree that one solution may not fit every community. But if you're on an electric platform, it's adaptable. It's energy source agnostic. It can use fuel cell electricity. It can use CNG electricity. It can use coal-burning electricity or nuclear electricity. It doesn't matter where you get your source. And if a community is more progressive on renewables, that's great. Whatever they implement is immediately transferred to the solution that's in your electric platforms. And when you're buying a bus, that bus solution is a bus solution you're going to have for 15 to 18 years. Those buses are meant to last 15 to 18 years. So if you're locking into one energy solution, whether it's a diesel solution or a CNG hybrid, you're betting on that fuel source for the next 18 years. But if you're electric, you're actually not betting on a single source. Whatever your community adopts over that period of time, you're immediately adapting on your public transportation. So you can clean up the environment as your community has an appetite and resources for it. So these are some of the buses and the bus fleets. And this is the total life cost that we've shown. And this is including CapEx and OpEx. So you can get a pretty good diesel bus for about $350,000. A CNG bus, around $450,000. If you do something with clean diesel or clean CNG or CNG hybrid, that gets to be about $700,000 in your upfront bus cost. An electric bus from BYD has landed in the U.S. for $650,000. If you couple that with the fuel cost or the fuel savings, the maintenance cost or the anticipated maintenance cost of an electric vehicle versus rebuilding that diesel bus over those 15 years, you see that you save about $500,000 over those other solutions in total life cost over 12 years. So we believe this is going to not only be a mode to recover our environment, but it's an economic recovery. When you're driving 65 passengers on $8 of energy for 187 miles, now you can expand your mass transit routes. Now you can increase the number of bus drivers you're buying locally. So we believe this is a path to economic recovery for a lot of communities. And then the charging in China is very different than what Europe and what the United States is adapting. The trend is for fast charge. And that's driven from a number of needs. There is a lot of densely populated cities with shared parking. So they have to have a rapid charge facility where people can come in and rapid charge. For the last 18 months, those taxis have been pulling into public charging stations owned by the utility. The utility actually charges about 4 times the going rate for electricity. So they have a revenue source. And those taxis fuel up during the day, during their driving time, and it takes about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the state of charge when they pull into the fuel station. And then at night, those public stations, those utility public stations, are where the electric buses park. They park and charge at night. So the same facilities are multi-used across Shenzhen. Their plan is to have, I think, 250 of those installed by the end of this year, and they have funding to do 22,000 charging stations by the end of 2012. So you see that, and if you look at what their 5 pillars of national growth, one of the pillars is electrified transportation, electrified public transportation. And they have $15 billion US that they're putting for in just Beijing alone for infrastructure improvements. And here are some more of the Chinese multi-charging facilities. Now, the charging technology is different than CHAdeMO. So CHAdeMO, at least the older standard, was a 62 kilowatt maximum. The China standard's up to 180 kilowatts, which means you can literally charge 3 times faster. Now, the pins on those adapters are much bigger. They're for a max current of about 300 amps per pin. They are bidirectional. There's very different standard in China, but it's out of a need driven for rapid charging. And we believe the trend will be, as cities attract more people and have more shared parking, you will need multiple fast charging facilities across the city. For the United States, it's different. 80% of our residents have garages, and so for the next couple years, we'll be charging in our garages and powering our commute. We're not really thinking about long-range cross-country trips yet with electric vehicles, though that E6 goes 300 kilometers as well on a single electric charge. So what is the China state doing? Well, there's a significant amount of investment they're putting in. Now, today, they import about 50% of their oil. So they see this as a national issue for security specifically, and they obviously have some needs to reduce the pollution in their densely populated cities because they bear the weight of those healthcare costs. So there's a lot of reasons why the state wants to begin targeting these new energy vehicles. They want to reduce the consumption of oil for obviously security issues, and they want to increase the number of vehicles on the roads, specifically new energy and battery electric vehicles, and they're throwing a lot of incentives. I'll show you some examples of incentives, but they want to put in these state grid and these southern China grid charging stations to support longer range transit. And then these were the initial 5 cities. So growth hasn't been as fantastic as we wanted because they limited to a number of cities they were launching. They've expanded that now to about 20 cities. But to give you an idea, in those 20 cities, what those savings are, we're talking $18,000 US for a subsidy on an electric vehicle. So that E6 that has a 60 kilowatt hour battery that sells for about $35,000 US with $18,000 off becomes very attractive. It goes almost 200 miles with a single electric charge. So it's driving some very interesting demand, and we see initially fleets picking these up in significant amounts. We've been sold out for domestic bus production and domestic taxi production just for the fleet sales. And so we've been focused on fleet sales, and I believe that we'll continue to be focused on fleet sales because of the orders on hand. We see the city of Shenzhen has 13,000 buses. Their plan is over the next 6 to 8 years to replace those 13,000 buses with electric. Now, just to reset your understanding, in the United States, our bus rapid transit fleet, when you add them all together, is about 66,000 buses. Now, if you add on shuttles and charter buses, it's different. But when you're just focused at the bus rapid transit, 66,000 buses. China has 1.5 million. Very different. And they are forcing national standards. Now, the way they work with standards, as soon as the standard's implemented, it takes precedent over all standards. Immediate adoption of new standards. So there are some advantages to a single point of decision making. And that's driven some of these new standards very, very quickly. And they're recognized for their strides in the EV standards. And I believe there are some things we could probably learn and adopt from the economies of scale that will be driven from China and some of the learning. They've got 1.6 billion people. They've got a very large test market that we can learn from. And this is not another 8-hour Beijing traffic jam. This, and you can't see the title, this is zero tailpipe emissions. All these vehicles are electric. So it's not just one company, it's hordes of companies in China that are going. And I was pleased to hear that GM is launching an electric vehicle production with the SAIC group. That gives credibility and credence to that market. And I do believe because of the adaptability of the electric platforms, they are the vehicles of choice in the future. One point I would say, though, is there are times when we want our freedom. Americans love the freedom of the road. But there are times when you don't take a different route to work. And I don't know how many of you go to work every day, but you don't drive a different route. There are times when you could use your time better. And if we could upgrade the demographics of the ridership on our buses with mobile offices, we'd be riding more of these mass transit solutions because we have better things to do with our time and our commute. So I believe there is a place for both. And BYD is focused on both the rapid transit and the bus, as well as the electric vehicles for personal driving. Thank you.